We are Patrick and Rebecca Childress on the sailboat Brickhouse, a Valiant 40, and we have been fighting our way south along the East African coast, trying to get to Richards Bay, South Africa, but bad weather just keeps tripping us up. If you could click on the subscribe button, that'll be a big help if you haven't already. And also in the video description, there's a link to the tip jar, which if you wouldn't mind supporting some of the equipment that we use to make these videos possible, that would be greatly appreciated. So now let's get moving south. After 9 days and 1,000 miles on the ocean, we are finally safely anchored in a very out island called Bazaruto off the Mozambique coast. And we will sit here day after day after day and check the weather and see when the southerly wind, this strong southerly wind, will finally shift directions and allow us to continue on south to South Africa. When we came into this area with the sailboat, we had to motor around quite a bit and survey the bottom. The water was way too shallow in one area to feel comfortable anchoring, but then it immediately dropped off to very deep water. But we finally found a plateau that was large enough to drop the anchor in 30 feet of water, and the anchor could set, and even if we dragged a bit in one direction or the other, we wouldn't go in too shallow, nor would we go out too deep.
Okay, so it looks like we got here just in time. That's what's blowing out there right now, and it's fairly uncomfortable in the anchorage and probably pretty uncomfortable out there. What I see in the next week and a half to 2 weeks is all south wind, strong south wind with a few breaks here and there for a day or two, but you know, a day or two is not long enough to go the 500 miles to Richards Bay or even the 330 or something it is to the other bailout point. So we really can't leave. I mean, we could leave and we could have a nice fun amusement park ride, you know, tacking east and tacking west and tacking east and tacking west, because we could not make any south with these big waves and with the wind on our nose. So I think we'll just stay put.
So we settled in for the long wait, and we had another visit by the local fishermen. This time they had a bucket full of very large squid, and I traded some monofilament fishing line, 300-pound test, a big coil of it, and an old pair of shower sandals, shower shoes, flip-flops, and our trash bags. That was very nice of them to take that off of our hands for us. But I'm not a big fan of calamari. Ordered in a restaurant, it always seems to taste like a bunch of rubber bands and actually with no flavor at all. But Rebecca cooked this up, simply sauteing in butter and a lot of garlic. It was excellent. Very tender, very sweet. Certainly something that I would order again. In all the days that we spent in this anchorage, we never launched the dinghy and we never went ashore. We were told by other cruisers when they did go ashore here that the natives were not very receptive. And the operators at the very exclusive lodge that cost $1,000 a day to stay at were not impressed by having people invade their shore in small dinghies and walk in and be startled at the price of a hamburger. And we're also warned just not to leave our sailboat unattended. So we camped out on our boat for all these days, and that gave us plenty of time to do other things. But all this time on our hands, it gave me the opportunity then just to sit in front of the computer 8, 9, 10 hours a day, day after day, and make videos. It is incredibly time-consuming work, tedious work. It takes me 2, sometimes even 3 hours to make 1 minute of viewable video. However, one day, rather than strong winds, we had absolutely zero winds. And that wind was just the best day. It was the only calm day we ever saw on this whole east coast of Africa. And we took advantage of that calm to take down our 11-year-old mainsail, which now had more rips than ever before, and it probably would not last through a storm. I was getting every mile out of that sail as I could get, and it was time to put the new one on. But that old mainsail still had a big use coming up, and it would be a very helpful drop cloth when we haul Brickhouse out of the water in South Africa. We chose not to go with full battens for our new mainsail. Nearly every sailmaker that we talked to wanted to sell us full battens for our mainsail, and this is the reason why we didn't want them. If we're on a beam reach, the sail will be resting on the aft lower and the intermediate aft shroud, and that's a chafe point. We never had a problem with chafe because we always had chafe gear like PVC tubing on the shrouds. However, if we had full-length battens, then that would cause a hard spot where it comes in contact with that chafe gear and possibly cause sail damage. The only place we could get away with a full batten would be the very upper, the number one batten at the very top. Also, if we had full battens and they were pressing up against the aft lower shroud and the intermediate shroud, causing wear spots in those areas, it could also be acting like a lever and prying up against the sail slugs, or in some cases on some boats, the roller cars. Would this cause unnecessary wear or unusual loads on those areas? I don't know, but I'm just staying with what is tried and true on our boat and what I know will get us across many oceans to come. All right, Rebecca, we've been here for almost 9 days. We've been checking the weather every day. What's the weather looking like for tomorrow and thereafter?
Well, the good news is that there's going to be east wind and about 15 knots, so beautiful. Well, not perfect, but beautiful in the sense that we can get out of here.
The east is better than anything else that we've seen for the last 9-10 days.
Yeah, I think it'll just be a little hard getting out of here, but then once we get far enough out, we'll be able to make some stuff things. So I think it'll be good. But it's only a 3-day window, and it's 500 miles to Richards Bay.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. What's our next bailout area?
In Haka, right outside of Maputo, which is about 380 miles away. So I think we should be able to make that in 3 days. You know,
we're going to have to.
That's what's coming in again in 3 days.
Was that like 25, 30 knots
it's
on
32,
those?
32 and thereabouts. So I'd like to be in somewhere before that comes because, you know, with the currents and the wind against the current, I'd prefer not to be out there.
Since this is ocean sailing, with the big waves against us, we end up against 25 knots of wind. We end up tacking east and we end up tacking west.
I know.
We can't make any southing. If this was a bay, we would not have those large waves holding us up, so we would be able to make some southerly progress. But we've been also finding contrary currents along this
Sometimes
coast.
contrary, sometimes not sometimes helping us, but
Yeah, I mean, I've always heard all these terrible stories. 5 knots of current along this coast. Oh, look out! And especially if the wind is against the current.
That's more
well,
south.
so far the current hasn't been there. I think we found 2 knots, 3 knots at the most.
yeah, we'd always kind of find it. I mean, you know, they were never as strong as what they predicted. But then again, the 2 or 3 different models were always different from each other, which always indicates that
Uncertainty.
Yeah, so.
All right, so I checked the tide tables. Tomorrow we have to get out of here before sunup. If we wait until after sunup, the tide will be coming in, and we don't want to have to fight that on our way out of here. So I checked. We would have to get up and leave at least 2 hours before sunup to get a helping current out of here. So we'll leave in the pitch dark.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
All right. Yeah, it's a good thing we have such a good close track on the way in. We can have no problem getting out of here in the dark.
Right. Everything was deeper when we came in anyway than we expected it to be. So I'm comfortable with that. We can go out.
All right, great. All right, so let's eat a good dinner, go to bed early if we can.
I'll make you a nice dinner, honey.
Oh, nice. Looking forward to that. And then we'll get out of here early.
Okay. Sounds like a good plan. Yay, we finally get to go.
Yeah.
Oh. Ten left.
10 left.
Another 10 left.
10 left.
Patrick, the other left.
Oops. I'm just the trained monkey. All I have is 4 buttons to push in response to Rebecca's voice commands. So I have the easy part. Rebecca has the far more difficult part of keeping us off the rocks, and she does an excellent job of that. So in the black of night, we work our way back out through this labyrinth, and we feel perfectly comfortable doing it. We work our way up to the north end of the island and then head out the best as we can to go east and tack out to sea to get some clearance away from the island. But while we're in close to shore like this, we're threading our way through very narrow channels, I set the sensitivity up for the autopilot. That is, the wheel will turn and respond much faster. On the Raymarine control head, it is called rudder gain. And in the narrow confines of this channel, I need a very fast response on the wheel. So I'll push the -1 and the +1 button simultaneously and hold it until the rudder gain menu comes up. And then I'll push the +1 button the number of times I need to bring it up to number 7. And that is a very good response rate. The settings are from 1 to 9. Number 9 is just way too fast of a rudder gain response rate. Once we get back out on the ocean, I'll push the -1 and the +1 simultaneously again to bring up the rudder gain menu and set everything back down to number 3, my normal setting. And this is plenty fine out on the ocean. It doesn't swing the rudder quite so fast and quite so much. It saves on electricity and also wear and tear on the machine, and we just don't need to steer that tight of a course generally out on the ocean. If the waves really pick up and the weather picks up and I'm not using the monitor self-steering vane and we choose to use the autopilot, then at that time I might set the rudder gain to one of the more middle numbers, like about 5 or 6. Of course, the lower the number of rudder gain that is used, the less energy and the less wear and tear that will be on the steering system. So we head offshore and we want to get at least 10 miles out before we tack on around and head south. And what happens when we do tack around and head south? Well, we head right back towards shore again, but fortunately a more southerly point of the shore. So all that we can do is stay on that tack and hope that something happens to the wind when we get closer to shore and it'll shift down on around and help us to go south rather than southwest. And after 2.5 days, our new hiding spot was in sight and the weather had certainly cleared up. Look at this, not a cloud in the sky, except for a couple puffy ones just over the island that we're going to be hiding behind. A beautiful day and a nice beam reach. Who would ever suspect that there's a 35, 45 knot storm on the way? I wasn't liking the looks of this. This is an open roadstead where we were told that this would become a mill pond during a southwester blow. I have never seen an island open to the ocean where waves did not wrap around the island and make everything an untenable anchorage. But we were assured that this is the place to go in a southwester. We could anchor safely underneath this lighthouse. So we reconnoitered the area, took a lot of soundings, and determined just exactly where we would anchor in 20 feet of water to leave us plenty of swinging room, but also to snuggle up underneath this island in the lighthouse. Once that was complete, then we followed the range marks away from the lighthouse towards a channel that had no more existent buoys or markers of any kind. So Rebecca's eyes were once again fixed on the chart plotter to thread us through this channel, while my eyes were fixed on the water ahead. We worked our way over to the west side of the island. We found a place to anchor, and we settled in and waited. We had a very comfortable night in this anchorage, and while waiting the next day, we overheard the conversation between a large ocean-going tugboat and Maputo Harbor Control, which was 10 miles to our west. The tugboat was on his way to Cape Town and decided to turn around and come back and anchor in the large shipping anchorage of Maputo. He also wanted to take shelter from the storm. This made us feel much better for our decision for doing the same. But the following day we had to pick up anchor and leave this nice calm place because the wind was coming out of the south and it would be building soon. It was time to take shelter underneath the lighthouse. So we retraced our track back out and around. As night came, the waves did wrap around the island. It became a real toss-up. Was it actually safer and more comfortable out at sea or sitting in this terrible anchorage waiting for the chain to break or the anchor to drag. So we decided to pick up and head out. So we'd be sailing into all the things that we were desperately trying to avoid. And we kept going. We had no alternative. Eventually the storm passed and we headed on south to Richards Bay. So we had the rodeo ride we fully expected, but the boat held together. There weren't any leaks. Rebecca took shelter in the aft cabin, wedged herself in. Who knows where Lily the ship's cat went to. And I kept a watch outside, but also monitored all the electronics until I just couldn't stay awake anymore. Then Rebecca took over for me, and I took my turn to wedge myself in to the aft cabin. We had fought against the weather and the wind all day, but then suddenly the wind shifted out of the north and hovered around 30 knots. Perfect. We would set the sails and squeeze every knot out of that wind. In 30 knots of wind off of the starboard quarter, there's all the good reasons in the world not to have a mainsail up. Having a mainsail up with the wind off the quarter, in these high of winds, it has the effect of the center of effort being too far aft and torquing the boat around, making it much less stable and much more difficult to steer a straight line. It also blankets the wind getting to the jib. So without the mainsail up, all we need is the full Genoa at 120%, and I also had pulled out the little staysail, but that's when the wind was only blowing to 15. But once it did get up to 30 knots, I finally did have to take it down. It was just overpowering the boat. We weren't going to go any faster with that extra sail up. So we got that rolled up out of the way, and we just carried on with the full 120% Genoa. If the wind had picked up any more than 30 knots, I would have started rolling up the Genoa and just make that smaller, and we still would have gone just as fast. So we pushed hard. We had to get the 192 miles south to Richards Bay as fast as we could. Another storm was coming out of the southwest, and this one would be even more intense. We wanted to get to the safety of shelter and possibly even tying up to a dock before the bad weather hit. And somehow we were able to do it. As we approached the channel to Richards Bay, the Harbor Control asked us to stay out of the shipping channel, but just parallel it on the north end and keep an eye out for the ships. They have the priority. No problem, they didn't even have to tell us that. And of course, entering the harbor, this is quite different than in the United States. Green is on the right and red buoys are on the left. How nice to be in the safety and the shelter of an enclosed area and work our way through a little bit of a labyrinth of deep water this time and pull into a dock. And then as it got dark, the wind shifted to the west and picked up to strong. The rain came down hard, but we didn't care. In the next episode, we'll be preparing our boat for the hard life out of the water and dealing with monkeys as neighbors.